Hey fabulous DIYers, it's Deanna Tabois here, and in this video I'm going to show you how to sew this halter tulip mini dress. So let's begin. So I'm working with 2 yards of sequin fabric, and I have stretch lining, which is interlock, also 2 yards of that, an open zipper, the length of my dress, and lastly you're going to need pattern paper. So in my last video I showed you how to drape this halter tulip bodice. As always, I'm going to take my drape pattern and take them apart. So as you can see at the edge of my paper, I drew a 1-inch mark line. That is going to be the placement where I place my bodice against. And I'm going to trace over my pattern. I'm going to indicate all my seam allowance, and I'm going to trace all the other patterns as well. Here is the princess side panel that I'm tracing. And for the skirt, since the skirt was placed on the princess seam, I'm going to use that center front line to help me guide the skirt. I'm going to stretch out the skirt, which will reveal the pleats. See, I'm going to trace the whole entire skirt pattern, and I'm going to indicate the marks where I need to create my pleats when it's time for me to transfer it onto fabric. You want to do this if you have a pleated type of pattern. So as you can see at the bottom of my skirt, I went ahead and traced it as well, and the rest of the way towards the front of the skirt I just basically freehanded, but I'm going to go back and fix it with my curve ruler to get it the way I want it to shape. So here I am perfecting my lines at the side seam. I'm indicating my 1/2 inch seam allowance at the top waistline of the skirt, and then I added a 1/2 inch seam allowance at the edge bottom hem of the skirt. Once you have copied all your pattern pieces, you want to cut them out. Here, the center front bodice, I cut it with a 1/2 inch seam allowance in the front because I'm going to be cutting that twice. Lastly, here is my back portion of the dress pattern, and I'm going to remove all those darts, and here I am drawing the center back line, once again 1 inch from the edge of the paper, and I'm going to place the pattern piece against that line. I added my 1/2 inch because it will be cut twice, and then I'm going to trace the entire back dress bodice. Here I took my marker and marked the dart, and now I'm fully tracing the whole entire dress. You want to make sure you trace the waistline so you know where to match up, and I'm going to extend it down 1 inch because I want a 1 inch hem finishing. I'm doing this for only the back portion of the dress. So here I am taking my curve ruler just to perfect the back dart, and once I've done that, I go ahead and cut out my pattern piece. So once you're complete with all your patterns copied and traced, it will all look like this. Now it's time for you to transfer the patterns onto fabric. So with sequins, it gets a little messy, so I turned over my fabric on the wrong side so I can place my patterns. It's much easier to cut through when you place it on the back side of the fabric. So here you see I cut all my patterns, and now I'm just cutting my indications so I know where to pleat my fabric. Pardon me because of the blurriness. Here I just basically put the pins through the dart area, and I'm going to take my marking chalk to just copy where the placement of the pins were, so that way I can have a copy of the dart. You can see the dart placement right there, and I'm going to re-pin it into place, making sure that the pattern pieces are both evened, and I'm going to flip it over to trace the darts. And then your pattern will look like this. I already cut them out in my lining as well and mark the dart, as you can see the markings. First, we're going to be working with the bottom portion of the skirt. I've took the sequin fabric And then now I took the piece of the lining, which I'm placing on the face of the fabrication. So you want to make sure you match that up. So we're going to go ahead and pin the edge to stitch a 1/2 inch seam allowance. You want to do that same thing for the other one. Once you have them all pinned up, it's time for you to stitch them down. So here I stitched it down, and you want to go ahead and just flip them inside out on the right side, and here is what it will look like. I'm going to press my edge, my seam allowance hem when it's time, but right now you just want to go ahead and just match up everything into place neatly with the skirt fabric. So here I'm going to look for my notches and match up the notches to the pleats so that way I can pleat my skirt at the waistline. So just make sure that the lining and the skirt fabric is all lined up together in order for you to do the pleating. And you just want to go ahead and try to pleat it as best as you can. Sequins is a bit tough to fold depending on what type of sequins you are using. This one is not as thick, but there are sequins that are thicker that require different type of techniques. So here I'm just basically pleating it into place and matching it up at the notches. It will look like this, and you will want to repeat the same process on the other skirt. Here I recommend you to press the hem edge and waistline edge. Now that I have everything done with that skirt, it's time to move to the center front bodice. So I took the bodice pieces and lining including, and I'm going to fold that over onto the face, and I'm going to pin down 3 inches and stop there. And I'm going to stitch it down about 3 inches from the neckline, and then at the hem of the bodice waistline, I'm going to go and bring that up 3 inches as well. I'm going to stitch that down, 1/2 inch stitch, going upwards and downwards. The center of the front bodice will be open. Now I'm taking the princess side panel to connect to the front bodice, and I'm going to repeat the same process as I did in the front bodice onto the lining. So here's my lining, and now I'm going to get ready to stitch everything up. Now once you stitch, it will look like this. Everything will be open. Now that you have your bodice stitched up, now it's time for you to place the skirt. The skirt, since we stopped at the princess seam, we're going to place the skirt from the edge to the princess seam one at a time. So you want to place that first petal portion over to that princess seam, and then you will lay the other side of the skirt on top of that skirt, making sure that it reaches the princess seam on the other side of the bodice. So pin that down into place to make sure that nothing moves. And once you have everything pinned down, then you want to add the lining bodice right on top, making sure that you're going to match it up at the waistline. And you can use the same pins that you pinned down the skirt with the front bodice. And here you can see me repinning it down, so it's going to be very thick at the waistline. And then you want to stitch a 1/2 inch stitch right across. So here I recommend you to hold down your sequin fabric when you're sewing, and I also recommend you to change your needle to a heavy duty needle, like for denim and other heavy duty fabrics, so that way it can sew through easy. So once you finish with that, everything will look like this, nice and neat, and this will be the front of your dress. Next, we are going to go ahead and connect the neckline. Flip it inside out, connect at the neck. So I'm going to straight stitch the neckline. And then now, once you finish with that, it's time for you to go in and connect the lining to the front bodice shell. So as you see where you started, where that first end mark was at the neckline, you want to connect that starting from that point and bring it down to the end mark at the bottom portion of the bodice. So you want to do this one side at a time. So I'm going to pin along that neckline so I can clean up that seam. You want to sew a 1/2 inch just like you did in the beginning, just to make sure that it's all even, and it will look like this once you finish stitching it. So here you can see the neckline is nicely neat, and I'm going to show you what it looks like on the inside so you can see that that seam is cleaned and neat. Next, it's time for you to do the armhole. We're going to measure on our dress form where we had taped previously the length of that strap that needs to go from the front to the back of the dress. So here you can see my measurement is 3.5. I measured to 4.5 to allow seam allowance, and I'm going to add those strips. Those are binding strips. You can create them or buy them at the store. I'm going to just connect it at the top edge of that neckline. So I'm going to pin the first one into place, and then I'm going to go from the side seam of the top bodice and flip that lining over it to secure that binding at the edge. And then you want to fold it completely over to the side so that way you can close that armhole area. And then it will look like this. Repeat the process for the other side. And once you complete, it will look like that. So your front portion of the dress is complete. Next, it's time for you to do the back bodice. And here I am grabbing the back portion, turning it onto the wrong side, and now I'm going to connect my darts by using the markings. Once you have your darts pinned into place, it's time for you to stitch it down. Repeat the process for the other side as well. You're going to stitch a straight stitch. I went ahead and did the same thing for my lining as well, and this is what it will look like once you've finished. Next, you want to place the lining on the face of the fabric and pin along the center back seam and along the neckline as well. So as you can see, it's all stitched down and the back portion is ready to be placed onto the front portion of the dress. So I'm taking one side, just the sequin portion of the back bodice, and connecting it at the side seam of the front bodice only, leaving the lining out. Pin that along the side seam and you will have an extension of 1 inch at the bottom hem, at the back only. Then once you pin the side seam, now you want to go ahead and just pin the back portion of the lining to the side seam as well. You're going to tuck everything in like a sandwich or a little cocoon and match it at the side seam. So here I'm going to repin it again using those pins and connecting the back portion of the lining. Then you want to stitch that down and it will look like this. So I'm going to turn it inside out, pull everything out, and then you have half of your side dress done. You want to repeat the same process again for the other side. Now it's time for you to connect the strap to the back portion of the dress. So here I'm placing a pin just to secure it into place, and then I'm going to go from inside the dress at the bottom hem and making sure that the strap is secured in that position at the top edge of the neckline, and making sure that it's placed there. And I'm going to pin it to secure it in place and pin along that neckline. You want to stitch it closed a 1/2 inch. And it will look like this. Repeat the process all over again for the other side. Now once you have done that, it will both look like this. Now it's time to hem the bottom of the dress. So now, since it's 1 inch, I'm going to flip it inwards, 1 inch zigzag stitch hem finish, just to make sure everything is nice and even. So here I'm pinning it into place and it will look like this. And you want to repeat that same process for the other side, and this is how it will look once you're done with the hem finish. Now I'm going to press the bottom hem just to make sure it's nice and neat. I place a muslin fabric. Some sequins can burn while you steam it. Take your zipper and place it at the center back. Mine is an open zipper, so I'm going to do it one at a time. And then once you are finished placing your zipper in, you're ready to wear.
Watch how you crank it up to shit up, blow your speakers. Watch how you crank it up to shit up, blow your speakers. Watch how you crank it up to shit up, blow your speakers. Your speakers, your speakers. To shit up, blow your speakers. Yeah.
And that is all. If you love this video, hit the like button and let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Thank you to everyone who has watched my content on my channel and chose to subscribe. Next year my goal is to hit 100k subscribers, and with your help by subscribing to this channel will help me reach my goal as I create great content. I hope you have a wonderful new year, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye guys.